Last week I covered statements made by the Pope, who, God bless him, he's been in the hospital and he's in bad shape now. Of course, when you disagree with anybody, it should never result in wishing bad things upon them. Um, anyway, he wrote a letter to the bishops, the Roman Catholic bishops in America, that was a pretty overt political statement against the Trump administration's immigration policy. I read a few paragraphs of that and critiqued it, and then lifted up some American Catholic responses to it. In that report, I did not acknowledge that there are bishops and leaders in the Roman Catholic Church in America who are standing with the Pope and his condemnation of this, and it's gone to a different extreme. Here's an article called "Bishop Suggested Excommunicating Catholic Backers of Trump Border Policies." The new Archbishop of Detroit, appointed Tuesday by Pope Francis, criticized President Donald Trump's decision to dismantle the United States Agency for International Development, and once suggested that Catholics involved in Trump's border policies could receive canonical penalties, including excommunication. The appointment of Bishop Edward Weisenberger came on the same day that the Pope, in a letter to the U.S. bishops, criticized Trump's policy. So it has a link to that letter if you don't know where it is. Trump's policy of mass deportations of illegal immigrants, and urged American Catholics not to lean into anti-immigrant sentiment. Francis also warned that criminalizing immigrants over the legal status deprives them of their dignity and will end badly. So the uniform response from conservatives has been, of course, we shouldn't be anti-immigrant de facto. There shouldn't be any kind of like ethno-nationalism. And when I say everybody, I mean most everybody. But that they disagree that exercising border law removes dignity from those people who are found to be on the other side of it. So that it's not a dignity issue, it's a rule of law issue. What is built on the basis of force and not on the truth about the equal dignity of every human being begins badly and will end badly. So if you want to read the rest of that article, then I don't have the link in the show notes. I should, but that was from Newsmax. Bishop suggested excommunicating Catholic backers of Trump border policies. So this is the sort of thing that we see all over the place, and this is why critical thought is so necessary. Is it the case that when you are found guilty of breaking a law, that the state, in finding you guilty, removes your dignity? And I think the answer has to clearly be no. First off, when you're made in God's image, there's nothing that can remove your dignity, but that kind of is beside the point. Secondly, it is to give dignity to a person to treat them as an adult. There's nothing more undignified than infantilizing somebody. And this is something that currently divides the left and the right, both religiously and politically right now. When we're talking about practicing the golden rule, I was going to connect you to the interview I published yesterday with James Whitford of True Charity. He and I had a prolonged conversation about what the love of Christ is when caring for the poor, how it is that we care for those who need help. Do we infantilize them and just shower them with stuff and make them codependent? Or do we treat them as adults? Now, in no scenario, this is where things get hyperbolic and crazy. When you suggest treating people like adults, there is a response from people going, you mean you just want to let them starve? You just want to let them go back to their country where they're going to get killed by gangs or sold into slavery or whatever? That is not a helpful response. I don't think there is anybody who's just unmoved by the plight of people who are in hard parts of the world. But there has to be a realization that we are not the world's police and we're not the world's saviors. That is not the proper role of any state, even a powerful, rich state like the United States of America. I remember whenever in the in the leadership of George W. Bush, it was the left at that point calling against this notion that we would be world police, that we would exercise some kind of global order as a hegemon. And I didn't say Pokemon, I said hegemon. That means like general ruler with unchallenged authority. So that's not what we're called to be. That doesn't glorify God, and that results in all kinds of corruption. And we find ourselves right now looking at a lot of that corruption that's been caused by us assuming an improper position in the world. So yes, short term, there's always going to be damage caused by any particular measure. If the church shows that it's unable to navigate the world, acknowledging that there is going to be harm done, by exercising laws. It's going to find itself in a position where it's against law. And the moment the church finds itself in a position that's against law, that is an unscriptural position. The state has been given the sword by God to exercise justice in the world, though not perfectly. And Christians are not primarily called to buck the state, although sometimes that time does come. But to imagine that the church's job at this point in time is to petition the state to have an open border so that anybody who wants in can get in, that is not a clearly evident biblical position. And something I haven't said out loud yet, but the case has been made recently by a number of people is, look, yes, in the Old Testament it does acknowledge that foreigners exist and that they need to be blessed and treated rightly by the people of the land. But it's also very clear that an invasion by massive amounts of people from the outside is a curse from God, that it is something that's destabilizing and not at all desirable. And so how do we reckon with the world as it is? One solution is let everybody leave where they are and come to the place where all the money is. That's going to destabilize everything. Another solution would be create world stability through mutual respect and partnerships aimed at stability and dignity. And that's hopefully the new world order that's emerging now based on reciprocity. This is what we're seeing in the tariffs thing. Apparently, the president has passed a new policy saying if you have tariffs on us, we're going to have equal and opposite tariffs on you. So this would be a notion of reciprocity. There are a lot of people who think that this is terrible, but if we are all equals, if America is not a hegemon or a tyrant over the world, but if we are engaging the world as equals, as I think we should, then that means we treat one another equally. We're not a Christian nation. A Christian nation would treat others better than they are treated. They would pour themselves out for others. But we are not a Christian nation, and that's something that the left was clear about until recently. Just because a lot of us are Christian does not make our government Christian. Rather, the government is governed according to worldly ethics, and perhaps that should be. This is something that Christian nationalists are arguing. Hey, it should be a Christian nation, and it should reflect our politics. And of course, the left says that as well. I come from a liberal tradition saying no, the state is empirically not a Christian entity, and for that reason, that's why it can exercise law and justice. If it all of a sudden becomes an extension of the state and of the church and becomes synonymous with the church, that's when you find a lot of really screwy things happening that are a problem. Now, I could be wrong on that stuff. Tom Holland wrote a great history arguing that the world was empirically made better by church and state cooperating together and becoming synonymous in Western Europe for a long time. I don't know if he would actually agree with that statement, but that you could reasonably come to that conclusion. Here, right now, let's come back to this situation. The Roman Catholic Church is trying to pressure the state to conform to its understanding of what dignity looks like. And I should say, again, it is entirely their right to make this case, but it ties into a larger concern I have of tone deafness on the part of the church that sees itself as a religious leader, but is actually an extension of a worldly political party, the oldest political party in the world, the most powerful political party in the world. And when we lose our discernment to see the difference between the church and a partisan political party, that's when we're in big trouble. So that's the question, as I look at the language of the Pope and of the Roman Catholic bishops, I'm wondering the capacity the church in America has for discerning how much of this is from the Bible, how much of it is from Christian tradition, and then how much of it is really just from the spirit of this age that is woefully separated from God. And I'm not the number one theologian, but what I would imagine is that anyone with a sober worldview would look at the rhetoric of the Roman Catholic leadership right now and see, hey, this is really conditioned by our moment in history. This is not reflecting eternal truth as known through the last 2,000 years of Christian history. So I hope that it's not just the Roman Catholics. I know I talk about them explicitly sometimes, and there's that dramatic response. Oh, do you think you're so... No, Methodists struggle with this in a big way. Methodists, man, more than most sects, married the spirit of the age. And we need to reflect on ourselves and how much of what we believe and care about is reflected in the scriptures, is reflected in history, and then how much of it is because we're just watching TV.